Guys, we have gotten this question so many times from so many of you, and we're gonna answer it today. It is, what can I do sexually once I'm married? Are there limits? Are there certain sexual acts that should be out of bounds or off limits for my husband and I? And so we, as usual, are not going to give you black and white rules. So what we're gonna do instead is ask you guys 3 questions for you to help you figure out what is right for your marriage.
Because Jesus answered questions by asking questions. So we are going to attempt to do the same thing. It probably will be less profound, but hopefully interesting.
So welcome back to another episode of Life Advice You Do Not Hear in Church. My name is Tiffany Dawn, and this is my husband, James. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to see more videos like this. And for all of you, we want to see you in the comments. I know there's all different perspectives on this question, and we want to hear yours. So
ultimately, you and your spouse should feel freedom to express yourself sexually. A lot of times you might say, hey, we can only do very specific things in marriage. I think you should think about it the other way around. I think you should think, hey, we want to try something, so we can unless it doesn't pass the test of these questions.
That's good. It's almost like a buffet table that you and your spouse get to go like sample all these different things.
Yeah, but these questions are going to help you from falling off the table.
Eating the scraps on the floor.
Yeah.
I guess my analogy breaks down.
It'll stop you from eating the plates.
Question number 1 to keep you from eating plates at the buffet is, does this invite someone else into our sex life?
Because the Bible is very clear. Marriage is between you and your spouse.
Right, your sex life.
No one else.
It's just the two of you. So like in our marriage, we're like, if there's another person coming in, obviously threesome, like not gonna do that. But also in the way of like pornography, like inviting someone else through those images into our sex life, that's something that we're not gonna do. Not only because, you know, pornography is very damaging to relationships, there's a lot of research on that, but also because that invites someone else in. And marriage is something, the Bible is clear, that's between you and your spouse. Your sex life is between you and your spouse. And so we wanna keep it that way and honor that marriage covenant. Question number 2 to ask is this loving toward my spouse? Does this shame them? Is this demeaning to them? I know there's been a lot of talk about like S&M and 50 Shades of Grey and all that. But anytime you're looking to hurt or put down your spouse, that isn't a way of loving them.
Yeah, there's a whole side of sexual acts that are not about love, but are about bondage and exerting power.
Yeah.
And you want to stay away from things that are about one person being strong and the other person being weak. In my opinion, something like that is not healthy in the long term, even if it seems like really exciting in the short run. If you're not really loving and honoring your spouse with what you're doing, it's probably not a good idea.
And I think if you have that desire, you're like, what would really like turn me on right now is to do something demeaning toward my spouse. That's something I would really take seriously. Like talk to a counselor about that. And there's no shame in this. We all have brokenness we're working through. But I do think that comes from brokenness or from something in your past or whatever. And I think it's important to find a counselor, to talk about that with them and start figuring out what's beneath that desire to shame or hurt my partner.
So question number 3 is, how does my spouse feel about this? And you need to give, if you're the spouse who wants to try something new, you need to give your other spouse some space to process it. Your spouse might say, oh, you'd want to do that? Okay, let's try it. Or they might say, well, I don't know. And so then that's an invitation to a conversation between you and your spouse. And you may eventually decide, hey, we do feel comfortable using a sex toy, or hey, we don't feel comfortable using a sex toy.
Right.
And either way is fine. That's your decision. You get to talk about it.
Yeah, and these are questions to ask together as a couple. It's so important to have conversations about these, especially like when you're not in the heat of the moment.
A lot of times you can feel a lot of pressure if you're in the heat of the moment, foreplay is going down, and all of a sudden someone says, let's do this, and the other person is like, whoa,
frozen. Okay.
New thing. You don't want to ambush your partner like that.
Right.
If you want to try something new or different, you have to talk about it in a non-sexual environment. So let us know in the comments, how have conversations about sex helped you and your spouse grow closer?
P.S. Come back Friday, because we have really exciting news. Speaking of sex, you'll see how this relates on Friday.